everybody. Welcome to our live stream. So today we are talking about Cat Cozies, Police Procedurals, and Dystopian Crime. We're launching both And We Shall Have Snow by Raye Anderson, The Cat Possessed by Louise Carson, and The Dying Detective by Gerald Lynch. So before we just get started, I'm going to just run through a couple of quick housekeeping notes. If you're having any problems with the live stream, sometimes Facebook Live will glitch, it may freeze or something like that. Usually just refreshing the page fixes most of those problems, so try that. Or you sometimes have to completely close out of the window, but that usually fixes most problems that we experience. Also, we will be doing an audience question and answer at the very end of the live stream. So if you have any questions for any of our wonderful authors this evening, be sure to put any of those comments in, or those questions in the comments section. You'll be able to find those there. We are wanting to support some of our wonderful indie bookstores. This year has not been a nice year to them. So in order to do that, we are pushing sales towards a few of our authors' favorite local bookstores. So links to purchase books are in the comments section, as well as in the description. So if you want to find any of the wonderful books, you should be able to do so just by clicking any of those links. And one last thing, at the very end of the live stream, we are going to be doing a giveaway. So if you want to get your hands on a copy of one of these books, put a comment in the comment section and you'll automatically be entered into the giveaway for one of the books. We'll do 3 different winners. And so I'll just randomly be drawing names from a hat at the very, very end. So be sure to leave comments. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Yeah, so with that being said, I'm going to bring our host on screen. Okay, hello. So our host with the most. So this is Doug Whiteway, or CC Benison, which is the pen name for our wonderful host. He has worked as a writer and editor for newspapers and magazines, as well as a book editor, and is a contributor to several nonfiction works. He is currently the mystery editor for Signature Editions and helped our authors make these books what you see today. So I'm going to hand things over to Doug now.
Thanks, Ashley. Hello, everybody. Hello, disembodied presences. Oh, hello, authors. How are you? I should introduce our authors. I will do it alphabetically, so you can wave when your name. Well, actually, you'll know which way you are alphabetically. Who else could be first other than Raye Anderson, right? Raye Anderson is the author of And We Shall Have Snow, a police procedural set in Manitoba's Interlake region, featuring as investigator the young and ambitious RCMP Corporal Roxanne Calloway. This is Raye's first crime novel, but she has been immersed in the arts for many years, working as a playwright, actor, director, and workshop lead. She was for 15 years education director at Prairie Theatre Exchange in Winnipeg, and has run theatre schools and delivered creative learning programs elsewhere in Canada, as well as in the Caribbean and in her native Scotland, where she first studied theatre and qualified as a drama teacher. And she lives, just south of Winnipeg Beach, right? Just north. Yeah. Actually, an area I know well, but probably not enough, I guess. Louise Carson, wave Louise, is the author of The Cat Possessed, the 5th volume in the Maples mystery series set in a small eastern Ontario town, and featuring Jerry Conybeare, a young woman who inherits a large house, 20 cats, and a number of crimes to solve. Louise is a prolific writer with several standalone collections of poetry to her credit. She's also a musician, a music teacher, holds a degree in music from Concordia University, is a jazz piano player and a singer, and she lives in Saint Lazare, Quebec. This is turning into a game show, sorry. And finally, Gerald Lynch is the author, most recently, of The Dying Detective, the concluding volume of a trilogy of dystopian crime novels featuring retired Ottawa detective Kevin Belden, combating his nemesis, evil mastermind, Dr. Ewan. Now, is it random or random? I always wanted to ask you when I was editing it.
Yeah. Well, it's random, but you
Random.
picked up the pun by accident.
Okay. Gerald's a professor of Canadian and Irish literatures at the University of Ottawa, the author of 2 other standalone novels, 2 collections of short stories, 2 volumes of nonfiction, as well as many essays, critical work, and reviews. He was born in Ireland, but grew up in Canada and lives in Ottawa. So this is us. Well, I think we're going right into questions. I think there's supposed to be a little super on the screen, but anyway, I know what it is. The question is, yes, here it is. Why do you write? Who wants to start?
Well, because that's what I like to read.
Hmm.
Me
What?
too. That's exactly why. Yeah, I have fun reading them, and I have fun writing them as well. Yeah. So yeah, it's a great, and I like trying to solve the problems of how to build that story and what's going on in them. So
Right.
I find it fascinating. So I have a good time writing them. At least I hope I have a good. And I hope people have a good time reading them. But yeah.
Gerald?
Well, I'm with Ray. I just wanted to have some fun, and I enjoyed the fact that the genre is sort of ready-made, so you can play around in it.
Well, yeah, like a bare bones. You can kind of add anything you want. You can use it for, quite heavy stuff if you want. Well, I think many readers want it on a lighter vein.
Yeah.
Be wrong.
I didn't feel like I was giving up anything or losing anything, or I wouldn't have stayed with it for 3 novels. I like the form. I like Raye and Louise. I'm a mystery fan. I just never thought to try and write one.
It's a great project for a Canadian winter, right? I mean, you can spend a whole winter writing a book, writing a first draft of one of those books, and the characters are fun enough that they kind of keep you company while you. It's a great COVID project.
Well, Raye, in your case, this is your first novel, but why did you choose a crime novel to be your first venture into fiction? Or no?
I kind of fell into it by accident. I was playing around. I mean, I've written some plays and stuff before, and I thought if I did anything creative, it would be that. I thought I was going to write a textbook on how to teach drama. That was the plan when I came out to live here at the beach, and it didn't happen. It's upstairs in 3 boxes, I think. But anyway, so I was playing around with a friend, and we were just trying out different styles. And one day I thought I should try something that I really enjoy reading, and what popped into my head was I'll have a go at crime fiction, and it just fit. I mean, I wrote the first chapter of this book pretty well, and then I kind of just knew where the next chapter was going to go, and I just kept going, and it kind of wrote itself. It was quite amazing.
Louise, crime novels or fiction wasn't your first choice, I don't think, was it? Because you've written your first.
I started as a poet.
Yeah, as part of the poet, exactly. So what drew you to this genre as a writer?
Well, I was writing historical fiction / fantasy set in Scotland in the 1700s, and it required so much research. So I thought, well, this is exhausting. Why don't I write about my neighborhood where I grew up and where I just live right now in the next town over from, which is Hudson, Quebec. I live in St. Lazare next to it. So I thought I'll just cut out almost all the research and just write a mystery, a light one, just for fun. And that's what I've been doing pretty well ever since.
Gerald?
Sorry.
Doug?
Well, your first works weren't these are crime novels. I don't think.
No.
No.
But there was always an element of mystery, of course. You could say there's mystery in every novel. People read to see what happens, how things turn out. The different with the genre of mystery is it involves a crime, and that's what you want to see, solved or the criminal punished or whatever. But I never felt, as I said, that I was shifting gears in any way.
Right.
The first novel in the trilogy, like, came out of the novel I'd written before, which wasn't
Right.
a mystery genre at all. So it was just a kind of natural thing. Again, as Raye says, it's probably dangerous to be too self-conscious about these things. Let them happen and then go back and be self-conscious.
Regarding being self-conscious, I mean, I always felt like when I was trying to write something serious, serious, I'm going to write some piece of serious lit, that the literary gods were sitting on my shoulder, kind of saying,
Yeah.
"You're writing rubbish." And the minute I got into this, the drama gods, those gods went, and the drama gods took over, right? And it became, just tell a story. Just as long as you get the story down and tell it clearly, you're fine. Yeah? And it was really freeing.
Mm.
Well, you still really have a Scotch accent.
Yeah, I know.
How long have you been in Canada, Raye?
Since 1972.
No,
Oh.
that's, yeah.
Mhm.
But Gerald, you were born in Ireland, but you must have left early because your
Yeah,
accent.
I was about 5.
Okay.
Left maybe, my family moved and I decided to go with them.
Well, you could have stayed. Who's your ideal reader?
Oh,
You.
Oh, thank you. I might not be your first reader, but I'm probably your 5th, maybe.
You're the best editor I've ever seen.
Ah, thanks. Do I get a prize?
Yeah.
All right, people, stop sucking up.
yeah.
Do you have an ideal reader, Louise, in mind when you were?
I would say, just judging by meeting people in bookstores when I sit there for 4 hours on a Saturday afternoon pre-COVID, that in reality it's not my ideal or anything, but my actual reader is female. And the males that buy the book are almost always buying it for a female, which you just told me previously that you had done also, Gerald. You bought it for your daughter.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily my age.
Louise, she's watching. It's a Christmas present.
Oh no! Get her a cat to go with it. I don't know.
Yeah, she has a cat. I like what you say. My ideal reader is the one in a bookstore with the money to buy the book.
That's
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a kind of collective reader. I have a kind of, I think there's a whole readership body out there that I kind of condense into one kind of ear that I talk to. I like to read. I like to read each chapter aloud before I kind of wrap it up and move on to the next one. And so I like that. I like that sense of being able to tell someone the story. So it's like having an audience. It's just like kind of there's this group out there that I'm telling it to.
Yeah, I like the idea of an ideal reader not being a specialist.
Mm.
You like a reader, who's willing to enter the book with a broad frame of reference and a willingness to, graciously accommodate what comes at them in the fiction, and not be looking for, cozy mysteries or, Sherlock Holmes or Columbo or anybody else. Actually, somebody who's willing to say, well, this is a book, this is a work of fiction, and I'm not going to be exclusive or narrowing in my approach to it.
It's good. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess even when I'm writing, I do tend to think the reader generally, because I think 2 to 1 women read or demand. I may be wrong. So when I'm thinking of an ideal reader, I sometimes think of a woman reading it.
Mm.
So I think I've got to get certain details. Like always, writing female characters their clothes is always a challenge to me. Like, what am I wearing?
Yeah. Yeah. I sometimes imagine female readers too, but admiring my author's photo. So that's an ideal that's never been reached, though.
Yeah. What about writing habits? I know writers always find that interesting. When do you write? How do you write? You know, looks like you all have your own little spaces. I have my little space. Oh, the curtains are crappy on this television. I'm gonna check my curtains. Are you morning writers, evening writers, anytime you can writers?
Morning writer.
Morning.
I get up in the morning, take the dog for a walk, I come back on the coffee and write.
Right.
My mind's used to kind of work best if I'm doing something like that in the morning. I can do revisions and stuff later in the day, but I'm definitely freshest in the morning.
Morning's definitely the window of opportunity, and I have found more so as I've grown older.
Mm.
The window closes in terms of your sharpness, I think, which you need. I know when I was younger and my children were young, I learned to write under any circumstances, any kind of noise. But as they grew up and moved away, you begin to really like the privacy and the silence. Almost a form of, meditation or dreaming.
Yeah.
Louise?
Yeah. Morning.
Yeah. Mornings.
And it's always the sofa in my living room.
Oh, really?
Okay. Because I write longhand. All my first draft is longhand, so it's a clipboard, a pen, and lined paper, and one or two cats, and that's the one room of the house that the morning sun streams in. So
it's lovely.
I like it in there.
I have a sunny kitchen, so that's where I did the first draft, and I write my first draft in longhand too. I can spiral notebooks when I do it double spaced, so I can kind of scribble all over it. Yeah.
And I use a stone slate and a chisel.
So you're out back in the shed then, I guess, doing that.
Yeah, that's why
But Gerald, do you do it right on computer, or do you actually do?
I do, Doug.
Yeah, me too. Sort of started writing when computers were first coming out. I worked in a newspaper, so actually writing by hand is something I do. Even my notes are on the computer. I just never write anything by hand anymore.
When it started, when computers came in and Word, whatever it is, I thought I could never do this. I have to go always with pencil and paper. I need the tactility of it or whatever. But now, whatever, decades later, I can't imagine doing it by hand. I mean, you actually physically lose the muscles. How quickly you begin to get writer's cramp when you write by hand.
Yes, just writing my signature is a challenge now.
Yeah, that's right. The lesson here is don't arm wrestle with Raye and Louise.
Yeah.
I think there is something tactile about. I think there is something about the mind-hand connection, though. Don't you find that when you're writing a first draft, you've kind of got to get into that some kind of subconscious zone, and there's something about sitting there for me and actually doing it in hand that seems to make that connection. Louise, I don't know.
Sure,
well, I can't actually get a laptop and two cats on my lap, so I kind of have to do the first draft longhand on a clipboard, way off to one side. Can barely see what I'm writing, but the main thing is that the cats are on my lap. So
how many cats do you have, Louise?
Just two.
Not 20? Oh, I'm so
no, not 20.
I loved your cats. I thought your cats were gorgeous in the book. Yeah.
Does anybody carry, like the two of you that write, Raye and Louise, do you carry a notebook with you when you're outside somewhere and jot down notes? Nope.
Never.
If I'm on a mission, then yes. If I'm planning a walk in the woods at a certain time of year for a character, or if I have to go down to a certain part of Hudson where I'm going to set some action, then I'll go down and take architectural or what's in bloom in June on this street kind of notes, because it just helps me for fleshing out those kinds of details.
Well, that sort of gets into the topic of research. How much research Louise, you said earlier you almost went to this genre so you didn't have to research. But you must
Well,
know.
you remember my first mystery was set in China and in Eastern Ontario, and I kind of knew Eastern Ontario, the part of it around Colborne and Port Hope. So that was okay. But the part in China, I was like, I don't know. So I had a friend who'd been to China many times to adopt children. So I picked her brain, and then everything else was online, watching videos of people going up by boat up a certain river in China and like just paying attention and seeing what they saw and fleshed it out that way.
Well, Raye,
that was one of the hardest books to research because China, right?
Yeah.
Who knows?
And you weren't planning to go. And if you went,
no, especially after the book was published, I figured probably not. I would not be welcome. So
yes, you wouldn't be welcome. No. Raye, you must have done some into police procedure, I guess.
That was really, really, it was so finding out about the RCMP. I mean, Roxanne's RCMP, right? The first one this book is set here in the Interlake, so it's RCMP. Yeah. So Roxanne is. So I started off the detective inspector in the RCMP, right? And then thought I'd better find out more about the RCMP. And it's kind of a closed shop, so it's really hard to find out what really goes on inside the RCMP. So I've been really lucky. There's someone who has a cottage near where I live who's been right through the RCMP and still works for the police. And he's been great on structure. So the first thing he said to me was, no detectives. There are no detectives in the RCMP. They don't use the word. So, and she wouldn't be an inspector because if she was an inspector, she'd be behind the desk. And so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. So I got a lot of, and he's still great. He's still advising me as to structural stuff, right? And if I have a question, I can always get a hold of him and ask him. But there's huge loyalty in the RCMP, so he's not going to tell me anything
like
gossipy, right? So I do know a guy who. Sorry, that's my dog. So there's an ex-inspector in the city who was with the city police. So he tells me stuff. So that's great. So now I'm getting that. But now it's really interesting. I'm hearing this from other crime writers that have police that we've got this whole problem now that we've always had the police who were the good guys who went out and got the bad guys, right? And now with what's going on politically, can we actually believe that anymore? And are we willing to go there? So here I am, with the RCMP and all these reports about misogyny in the RCMP going on. And I've got a woman officer in the RCMP. And my big question now is, do I go there or do I not? And it's really interesting because I try and have a light touch in how I do this writing. And it's kind of like putting a big heavy boot on, but I'm not sure if I'm going to go with it.
Right. Do your police officers, have they vetted the text? Do they read it before you send it to?
They both read this book. Yeah. They both read it. Yeah. Yeah. I made sure I actually had the first time I tried to find out what was going on in the RCMP. I called Gimli, and this nice little constable was very helpful as far as he could. Eventually said to me, "You're going to have to talk to the headquarters." So I phoned the headquarters. And I got Staff Sergeant Brian in communications, and Staff Sergeant Brian, which is about what I was on about. At one point, he said, "We are talking fiction here, madam." I hope no RCMP come knocking at my door one of these days.
Yes. Oh dear.
Yeah.
Now, Gerald, yours is in the future. And it's so imaginative in this sort of almost science, moving into science. You're sort of cross-genre. What kind of research were you doing for yours, or is it just all out of your head?
Yeah, well, as you say, one good thing about setting a fiction in the near future is that you've got a license. You can just make things up, of course. But, my answer to the question that's on the screen is that, again, like writing by hand or writing on the computer, it's changed so much over the decades because of the computer. There was a time when writing, whether it was criticism or fiction, I'd just accumulate a number of notes. It was like all over the place. Then I'd say, well, okay, I'll spend a few days in the library and answer these things. I don't have to do that anymore. Google answers just about everything. For example, for The Dying Detective, I needed to know something about St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. I'd been to it, but I couldn't remember. And you go on Google, they'll give you a map of the interior. They'll take you on a tour of the inside of St. Patrick's, and that's true of everything. You can find everything. Published articles that you once had to go to the library for. So, I don't even get to leave my room to do research anymore.
I know it's true. The internet's made a complete difference. I did a series set in England in the early 90s. It was before the internet, and I had, well, makes it sound negative, but I had the pleasure of going there and having to walk the characters through the rooms and the streets and everything like that, because it was the only way to do it. There was just nothing else. Some books, but now I could just use Google Earth and go down to London or whatever and never leave my...
You can use Google to stand across from St. Patrick's Cathedral and look at it from the outside, turn around and see what that setting is there. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll do away with fiction.
You can find out all kinds of modes of death actually online.
Or you can go down that YouTube rabbit hole. You're just connecting forever and learning new things. And then really the challenge is to cut off, not to be overwhelmed by information.
Yeah. At some point you almost have to stop researching, or you'll just be lost in the research, never get around to actually writing any text.
Mm-hmm.
The research is kind of a pleasure, but it's got to stop. Now, Raye, you've started. I think I'm getting the second manuscript. You're doing a series. Louise has done a series. Gerald's done a series. My series.
My second one's coming out in April. So yeah, and I've just started the third one.
Right.
Yeah.
But the pleasures of the series versus the standalone.
I think you've got a lot in place already when you want to write book 2, 3, and 4 or whatever of a series. There's a framework there for you, and so the only slight chore is that I make sure that while I'm writing, say, book 5, I would be reading books 1, 2, 3, and 4, and just making sure nothing is out of place, and that I still have, that room looks like that room, and that cat looks like that cat, and I make notes based on the previous books so that the next books will have the continuity that I need.
Right.
So that's a slight bit of work that has to go on in a series for me.
I'm curious about this because I've wondered about it. I didn't intend to start a series. I wrote the first book and it kind of became the first of a series. It just kind of followed. And I have wondered about, I'd like to have a go at a standalone at some point and just try something else. Because you go into this one blind and suddenly you're in a series and the thing has a life of its own. And you wonder just what else there is out there that you could get involved with. I think it would be really interesting to just go and develop a totally different other character and just do something completely. I worry sometimes that after a while you start to tell the same story.
Yeah, well, that's the question: is when should a series end? When do you know?
When do you know enough?
Like,
what was your answer?
Yours has ended, or is there a fourth?
Yeah.
Maybe. I think it's ended. But there is a kind of, well, I don't want to do a spoiler alert. There is a kind of open door at the end, but it's a very strange door. It would be into a very strange place. My reflection on the series versus the single novel question would be the series puts much more demands on you. Kind of as Raye said, the first one's just another novel or a novel. It's discrete, it has its own integrity, but you know, the readers I know who know about the dying detective, their response is, yeah, I'd like to see what happens to Kevin Belden. And, you know, and so it's much more demanding that way. I think as Louise said, you know, it has the advantage of, you know, what the cat looks like, you know, or if it's a normal character, you know what your characters, not to say cats aren't normal characters, but if it's just a regular fictional character, you know, it comes to you ready-made in the other novels of the series. But the demands, I think, of plot are much more. You've got to make the action and the plot make sense over a period of time. And, you know,
Well, that's what, oh, sorry. That's what I enjoy about writing the series, is that I'm going back, looking at the previous books, looking for little nuggets that I can use. And while I'm writing the next one or whatever, I'm still putting little seeds like that in so that there'll be other things to riff off of in the next book after that. So it's like a dominoes. It's just clacking along infinitely.
certainly useful for coherence and continuity, but geez, it's painful sometimes to go back. I often think, Doug, how did you ever allow that? But it's now written in cement.
Well, there's also the right term, I call it the beat, where it's the lives of the characters outside of the crime, like their love affairs, their relationships, their family, their divorces. All that has to be dealt with too.
Yep.
Thought about well into the future. Like, oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, well, Louise has done 5, and I'm just like, a young character, Agatha Christie could go on forever, really.
I know. So when does the series is over? I don't know. When I die or when?
There's lots of. I mean, guys like, you know, Lee Child and them. I mean, those characters have gone on forever, right?
Well, yeah.
And, yeah. And,
I think the trick is to put dying in your title, and then it's over.
Yes, that's so sad.
And then you go, damn it, he didn't.
Yeah, that would be.
I thought it was a really good ending. I thought it was a really good ending, you know. It just leaves that little bit. It's not quite dead yet.
Well, and also, if you have killed off a character and that's the end of him and it's done, you can always write another book about him and just set it 10 years before any of the other books were set, and you've got some prequels that you can write. So people who love a character will read those.
Yeah. You know, one of the questions that's going around now, have you heard, I mean, a lot of us write in the present, right? And so how do we deal with the fact, and if you're writing about now, we're in COVID, right? And we don't know when we're writing the book what is actually going to be happening at the time the book would get published, because we don't know what will be happening 6-8 months down the road, right? So how do we deal with that, right? So apparently a lot of people who write crime fiction are going back and setting, you know, having cases that happened back in the 1970s, and taking their old detective and making him 30 years younger.
That's the great thing about the past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, dealing with the contemporary events. And yeah, I got going to be a lot of COVID novels coming out in the next 2, 3, 4 years. Don't know if I want to read them though. I'm tired of COVID.
That's it. And I mean,
somebody else if you're under lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
Well, mysteries are escapist reading, right? So I agree. I don't want to read about COVID. A COVID set mystery. No.
I know Emma, you know, sometimes the writer lucks out. Emma Donoghue's new novel, I think it's called Under the Stars or something, is set in the pandemic from the early 20th century. And it sounds worth reading. But another way of coming at a pandemic.
If you can call it pandemic,
yeah.
Now, all your books are connected to where you live. I think, yes. Raye is in Manitoba, and Gimli and Winnipeg Beach in renamed essentially, but pretty
Yeah.
pretty historic, pretty much graphic
Loosely based on.
based on loosely
Yeah.
based. And Louise, you said Hudson, so it's Hudson, Quebec. Is okay. See, I always sort of wondered when I was, and I never asked you where yours based on. Is it?
Well, I grew up in Hudson, Quebec, so I have 22 years of living there. My first 22 years were there, and I haven't set the book back in that far back, but I have set it a couple of decades before the present time.
Right.
Just so I could have that space also for future volumes. So I didn't have that pressure of like, oh, I have to write about 2020. It's like, no. And I think once when we were working on one of the books, you said it kind of has that lost in time feel, like we're not quite sure what time we're in the book. So I purposely leave out things pretty much like computers and cell phones because they're not cozy. No. And I'm putting myself in a pre that era. So late 90s, early 21st century.
And yet it does feel contemporary when you're reading it.
Yeah, well, 20 years ago, and we're all old enough that 20 years ago, we can remember that.
Now, Gerald's are set in mostly, but they've been the last third all over the place. Not all over, many settings. Yeah. But you chose Ottawa, or a version of Ottawa for the trilogy.
Yeah.
Did you like is it a specific house that you chose somewhere in an Ottawa neighborhood, or?
The neighborhood is made up, and so is the street. But I have an area of Ottawa in mind, and it's a neighborhood along the canal. I think a lot of it for me is just laziness. I like a ready-made place. And when I but going out then and putting it into words, it doesn't make any difference whether it's there ready-made or you invent it from ground zero. The words transform it into a picture that's, I don't see it as any different from a painter going out with her easel and sketching in watercolors the city. I mean, it's so interpreted once it comes into language. But, and the rest, I'm not joking self-effacingly. It's just, the place is there. I don't have to make up a place. I just have to paint it.
Yeah.
And readers will read into it. They'll read their own experience and places into it to some degree.
How many
readers love that?
How many of you find that people read your book and think that they know who you base people on?
Oh, jeez.
Me. Yeah, they're always wrong. They're dead wrong.
Well, I know.
I'm surprised that they think it's them or they think it's somebody they know, and they're just so off the mark. It's an unusual phenomenon.
Yeah, nobody. It's strange. Like you can show somebody a photograph of themselves, and they'll complain, "Well, that's not me at all."
Yes.
But, so the chance of catching them accurately in a piece of fiction in a way they'll find flattering are like 0 to none, and as they say, none just left town.
But
I've
experienced it. I've the second book in this series is set in Winnipeg, so it's set in a fictional theater company in Winnipeg. So it's
nothing like Prairie Theater Exchange, perhaps?
It's called the Prairie Theater Center.
Oh. Oops. Is this a roman à clé?
No, it's not. Not really.
I'm going to type in a question so I have a chance at Raye's book.
Where were we? We're going to continue on this.
Yeah, I wonder if you start a series though, and you're with a certain place for a long time, do you ever kind of feel like you want to take your character and actually just take them somewhere else, just for a change of scene?
Oh, completely. Like a whole other city.
Yeah.
How about, let me ask you a question, Doug. You know, in Paul is Dead, under your pseudonym, you do a pretty detailed setting.
Yes. Well,
I know where he is. I know where that.
yes. Raye knows
I've
where.
never been there, and I know where it is.
Yeah, it's based on cottages I have known in the Interlake area that Raye knows. So
Yeah. It's very familiar.
So you can get that kind of.
It also ranges. You move along the byways and the highways and the towns.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that all accurate? Is that all literal?
Well, it's fairly literal. Unlike Raye is mined the same landscape, but she's fictionalized the towns. I use basically real names.
And I wrote about winter, right? And you were writing about midsummer, and
I was writing about
totally different landscape.
Yeah, that's true. For instance, I've hardly ever been, so I don't really hardly have no idea what it's like. It's a summer place for me. So, and as it was for that book. But it's not autobiographical.
When you make me think of it in relation to your novel and that setting, it isn't so much the details as the setting. It's, you know, whatever you do to convey, you convey that atmosphere so believably. You know, that summer, washed out, sun burnt.
Yes. Well, I guess I've lived it enough. Yeah, of all the novels I've written, that one's sort of closer to a lived experience. Because the majority of the novels I've written are set in the United Kingdom.
You murdered somebody?
Yes, and buried.
Yep.
Buried him in the backyard.
Yeah, I'm expecting
I'm glad we work at a distance.
No, it's all made up. Really. Oh, wink. All right, enough about me. One odd question that we talked about actually last week was the place of food in books. Now, Louise and Raye have food. Like, Louise has lots of food in her book. There's all these wonderful meals. You, Gerald, don't have a single meal in you, I don't think.
My characters are starving.
They're starving. And Louise's and Raye's are very well fed. Now, maybe, I wonder if this is one of those gender divide things or what. I know, for instance, I have a sense anyway that say in Cozies, readers like food. Now, I don't know if you did that consciously, Louise, or not.
Well, I actually made a list before I started writing the first cat mystery novel. I made a list of what I would like to have in my ideal cozy book.
Right.
So cake seemed to be the number one thing. And then cats. And then a beautiful big house on the waterfront on the Ottawa River, wherein I could pretend to live. So I constructed this little alternate reality that way by just going, what would I? Oh, and I'd love to be an artist. I'll make her an artist, which I'm not at all that, not at all a visual artist. So it was just a fun confection. So then by having her learn how to bake through the first few novels from her older friend, housekeeper Prudence, I managed to include a lot of cooking lessons in there, which was fun too.
Well, did you
and my favorite recipes.
Yeah, you put
the readers can tell.
I used it as a device to bring people together and talk and gossip because I wanted that to happen, and I want these gossiping groups to happen that happen in small towns and places like this. And I mean, it's how it happens around here. I mean, I was part of a book club at one point that's very like the book club in this book, where they get together and they sit and eat and talk all afternoon. Well, it was great because it was a great way to get 6 people around a table talking and speculating and stuff. But you know what? I had a thing at one point that I wanted to have a dinner party, a potluck dinner party. That's the other thing. It's a lot of potluck around here, so people bring food together and they eat together. But I thought it would be fun to do a potluck where everybody brought a piece of food that came from a book that was read in the book. Because food shows up in books all the time. Ian McEwan has a great recipe for fish stew in one of his books.
it seems food, when I think of it anyway, it seems to, I think, to agree with what Raye is saying, that when characters are socializing, food inevitably comes into it. I think it's the only time in my novel they're eating turkey sandwiches late on Christmas because they're socializing. I wonder. I hope I don't, get lambasted for suggesting so, but I wonder if there's a gender difference.
Yeah.
In female writers are more interested, first of all, in, I think interpersonal sort of relations and socializing. And so food comes into it more. And of course, traditionally, they just know more about food. I could have my characters drinking water all the time. That would work.
Great recipes in your book, Louise.
Pardon me?
There's some great recipes in your book, and you describe how to make stuff. It's great.
Yeah, and that's sort of like how I was taught how to cook. There was a recipe, but my mother was right there hovering, right? So that's how I learned the methodology, as opposed to just put the ingredients in a bowl and bake it. So tried to recreate that. And like you, I tend to have one big feast per book, where 10 or 12 of the main and peripheral characters gather together. And it's almost always at the end of the book. It's like, well, hey, we all made it, and the bad person is gone, and let's eat.
Actually, I see.
Cats aren't involved.
What was that?
As long as cats aren't involved in the meal.
Yes.
No.
Well, I see a question here about cats, and the question is to Louise. Did you start with the idea of 20 cats, or did it develop as you wrote the first book?
Well, because the book is based on a real live house, the Greenwood Centre for Historical Living, which is in Hudson on the waterfront. And it used to be a private residence, but now it's what I just said, a historical center. And I've been in it many times. I envisioned how many cats would comfortably fit into it. So I came up with 20 as a nice round number. Okay. So yes, I did have 20 cats right from the beginning in my mind.
Well, then they come and go. I mean, some have died.
Well, try to avoid cat deaths, because I've even had people at bookstore signings say, do any of the cats die in this book? And I always say, oh no, even if maybe one does, because I'm not to buy the book.
Goodness. Well, it's interesting
and
that
I figure, they may not even read the book.
But it's interesting.
Suicide, cat suicides.
Oh, cat suicide.
Have a cat suicide.
There is no cat suicide, but as you may or may not know, very sick cats will, like most animals, wander off.
Really?
Find a private spot to not commit suicide, but just to expire in peace. And so that is the cat scene at the end of my first mystery novel, where the heroine cat does that.
Really?
Based on a real cat that I owned. Yeah.
I thought only elephants did that.
No, almost any animal, even a dog that lives in the house with you. I mean, it's sad to talk about, but when they're in extremis, they will sit panting facing the wall. And that's when you know it's probably time. So they're switching off.
Right. When you started this, did you read, there's a whole subgenre of cat mysteries. Did you study them at all? Or?
I had read them, but many years previously. The one with the 2 Siamese cats, I had read that so long ago. And then I had read more recently, the one written by the lady in the southern United States, where she has, I think it's 2 cats and a dog, and they all have a conversation between each other. All right. And they solve the mystery, and they chat among themselves in a very human-like way. So I knew that was something I didn't want to do, was have my animals talk to each other or to the humans. So. But yeah, I've read plenty of cat mysteries. There's some European ones, but I just can't remember the authors now at this point. And some of them are one-offs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
I love cats and dogs
I think
I love dogs.
Yeah. Well, it'd be tough in France. You'd have to call it the Chat Mysteries.
Le Chat?
Yeah. Are there?
Cat mysteries in France?
Yeah.
Don't know.
Any sort of like tips for writers who want to enter this genre? If you're fancying writing a mystery, what should you do?
Read lots of them.
Yes.
Have fun
Yes.
with it.
Yes. Really, you have to read it extensively in your genre if you're going to write in it. But maybe that's
Learn to, whatever you write, learn to love being alone.
yes. That's
I've got a question. I've got a question for all of you. Do you plan your mysteries ahead, or do you write from scratch?
well, that's a good.
Sorry, I couldn't understand the question.
Do you make up as you go along, or do you plot the whole story before you begin?
Both.
Okay.
I don't make huge decisions about who done it until I'm about a third to half the way through, because I'm introducing new characters one of whom will be the murderer, and I'm introducing new characters, one of whom will be the murderee, and so I like to be ignorant myself while I seed the first third to half of the book with all these red herrings, some of which will turn out to be true clues. So then partway through the book, I decide, I go, he did it. Okay. And then I know, and I also may decide to kill off the second murder, right? Because usually there's a second murder. So.
Raye, do you do from scratch or do you outline?
I do from scratch. Yeah. I jump in. I need to know where the body is, the first body is. Once I've got that, then I'm off and running, and I make up as I go along, and I don't know until halfway, 2/3 through before.
Okay.
Before I really do it, yeah.
Gerald, do you want
I usually only have the first scene. I usually only have the first opening scene in my head, and then I go, okay, that's the opening, whatever, and we'll just go from that. Yeah,
isn't the expression that you're either a plotter or a pantser? You plot it out or you go by the seat of your
So both, really, both. Because it has to get tight. It has to get
pantser?
tighter as you go through it, and then in your revisions, you have to get tighter and tighter, and sew up all those pants. You gotta make it watertight.
Yes. Many drafts. What about your favorite writers in the genre? Who have you admired or read most often? Or
I'm reading a lot of the Scandinavian stuff, and I find it really interesting that there's this whole band of northern writers.
Good. It's really good.
It's really good, and I write. I mean, I'm Scottish, and I read a lot of the Scottish stuff, and it seems like there's an awful lot of people in the tartan noir genre that write like me.
That's who I'm reading. That's what I'm reading this winter is Ian Rankin. I'm reading it all.
Yeah,
I'm reading it all.
Yeah,
good.
Yeah.
It's really good. Rebus and Fox. Yeah.
I love Denise Mina, and
But Wallander is my favorite of the northern. I forget who's the author of Wallander.
Mankell, I think.
Yes, you are correct.
Yeah.
So he's very good. Yeah.
Gerald, who do you like in the genre? Who do you read?
Well, after Louise and Raye, I'm not a big reader in the genre, but I have favored writers who've turned to mystery genre. So someone like Graham Swift wrote a really good police mystery called The Light of Day. One of my favorite writers, Martin Amis, did one in a novel called Night Train. And you're encouraged by seeing writers you admire turn their hand to something else and do it well. There's an Irish writer, John Banville.
Yes, I just read one.
Yeah.
No, I just read.
You read one? A new one?
A new one called Snow.
Yes, yeah. The first one he's written under the name Banville. He's a great, serious literary writer. And he wrote detective stories under a different name. James Cummins, he was the first writer I read writing a kind of mystery police that really inspired me. It was this novel called The Last Kiss. And if you haven't read it and you're looking for something, he just blew me away completely. He wrote as well as my favorite prose stylist, like Martin Amis. Or Banville, just a brilliant detective novel who does so much with language that you're actually humbled.
Yes. One's often humbled.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, go ahead. Did I cut you off? No. There is another question here. Do you find when you read other books now that you can actually read for pleasure, or is everything you read with an analytical eye, especially when you're reading in the crime genre?
Yeah, I don't think I can switch off my analytical eye anyway, no matter what I'm reading. Or, I mean, in my family, we're all a bunch of critics, right? We just sit there and take things apart, like whether it's television or music or books or anything. So, yeah, I can't switch that off. And it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be critical.
The two ways of reading aren't exclusive.
Yes.
I think Louise is saying that too. But I have no trouble reading purely for pleasure and shutting off the critic and the teacher. Just like a kid getting lost again in Sherlock Holmes.
No, I mean, I can really enjoy it. I can just sit back and enjoy it. Although I must admit, I kind of I find myself, maybe because I'm fairly new to doing it, that I'm very aware of how the structure of one of them works. Like, I kind of find myself looking at that and thinking about how they've constructed a book.
Looking for something you can steal.
Yeah.
Other people. It's so interesting.
We're looking how other mystery writers put in the red herrings and the clues, and how they drop the shoe in the one chapter and drop the other one in the next chapter or in 10 chapters. And those little things are nice to pick out and sort through and say, oh, that's a good way to do it. Yeah.
I think it's a much more interesting genre than it's sometimes given credit for. I mean, look at the three of us. I mean, we're all entirely different, right? We write very differently, yet we're all really we're all under the same umbrella, but we're very different writers.
Right.
And I think we give a very strong sense of a certain kind of place and the people that live in it and all that stuff, right? That idea of how you can find out about a country or a place or the people that live in it. You find out a lot of that from reading crime fiction.
Yes, very much. Well, I'm running out of questions. Oh, people are leaving. Oh, goodbye.
Hi, I'm just going to come back on screen again. So I'm just going to do this. So a bunch of people have entered in our giveaway. So I'm going to pull some names out of a hat. So the person who is going to take home a copy of And We Shall Have Snow is Jonathan Meakin. So congratulations, Jonathan. You will receive a copy of And We Shall Have Snow. We'll be contacting you to get some information for that. Okay, and let's change the cover. There we go. Okay, The Cat Possessed. Who's getting a copy of The Cat Possessed? And Donald Johnson is winning a copy of The Cat Possessed. So congratulations. And last but certainly not least is The Dying Detective. And Sue Green has won a copy of The Dying Detective. So congratulations to all of our winners. And thank you so much for joining us on the live stream. I'm just going to pop everybody back on screen again so they can wave goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, friends.
Thank you all. Happy Christmas.
There we go.
Oh.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you for coming.
Feels like the end of the Beverly Hillbillies or something. We're done.
So, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that you enjoyed this wonderful conversation. Have a good evening. Bye.
Right. Thanks, Ashley.